The night of my husband's funeral, his estate attorney, a man named Mr. Harrington, handed me a sealed envelope. It wasn't a condolence card, it was a letter from Elias. I remember the attorney's somber, weary expression as he pressed it into my hand. Elias asked me to ensure you read this, Mrs. Thorne, before the will is addressed. I retreated to the quiet of our living room, the one that faced the willow tree Elias loved. I broke the seal. The paper held the familiar steady script I'd seen on countless blueprints and silly anniversary notes for 52 years. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Let's see. Watch what they choose, Clara. That's the real measure of their souls. I need you to see it too. I didn't understand. The words felt cryptic, almost cold. Not the Elias I knew. Not until 3 days later, when all four of us, my 2 children, my grandson, and I sat in Mr. Harrington's polished mahogany office. When Elias's last will and testament was finally read aloud, I felt a physical chill. I realized with sickening clarity what my husband had meticulously planned. He had designed a test into his will, one that would brutally force my children and my grandson to show me exactly who they had become, what they genuinely valued, and what they were willing to sacrifice for his memory. I watched my successful son, Adam, calculating the value of assets on his phone, while his father's favorite armchair sat empty. I watched my driven daughter, Juliet, planning immediately how to profit from the estate's liquidity. And I watched my grandson, Ethan, the quiet one they all dismissed, make a choice that didn't just break the will's structure, it fractured the foundation of our family. Elias wanted me to see the truth. And I did. But I wasn't prepared for the sheer, devastating cost of that revelation. My name is Clara Thorne, and this is the story of how my husband's final lesson cost me my children. Before we continue with the details of Elias's incredible scheme, please take a moment to leave a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. We are building a community of people who know that our best, most impactful stories can happen at any stage of life. Please subscribe to the Wisdom's Legacy channel, so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. Now back to the beginning. The Redwood funeral home reeked of stale lilies and industrial-strength floor wax. I sat in the front row, hands folded on my simple black dress, watching a procession of people I vaguely remembered file past Elias's closed casket. It had been 3 weeks since the sudden, shocking aneurysm. 3 weeks since I found him in the vast cedar-scented garage workshop, slumped over his antique drafting table like he had just decided to take a much-needed nap. My son Adam arrived 40 minutes late. He's 47, wearing a bespoke suit that screamed of high-end financial districts and required a chauffeur. His third wife, a woman I hardly knew, trailed behind him, visibly checking the stock market on her device. They hugged me with the kind of practiced, perfunctory sympathy you see at grand corporate galas. Adam smelled sharply of expensive Italian leather and cologne. His hands were soft and used to real work. "Mom, I am deeply sorry," he murmured. Traffic on the Beltway was absolutely crippling. It was a Monday at 2 in the afternoon. There was virtually no traffic. My daughter Juliet came next. 44. Her platinum highlights fresh from a top-tier Beverly Hills salon. Her designer heels clicked aggressively on the funeral home's thin carpet. She bent down and gave my cheek a fleeting, airless kiss, leaving a smudge of bright crimson lipstick I didn't bother to wipe off. "How are you genuinely holding up, Mom?" she asked, her eyes already scanning the room. I told her I was fine. She nodded, clearly having moved on to mentally listing the next item on her agenda. The short service began at 3:30. The pastor read from a generic script, filling in Elias's name where the blanks were. Adam's phone vibrated 4 times during the eulogy. He silenced it, but his eyes kept darting to his pocket. Ethan showed up halfway through the reading. 19 years old, wearing the slightly faded navy uniform from the local delivery service warehouse where he worked. There was a noticeable dark stain on his right shoulder and fine wood shavings still caught in his hair. He'd taken 2 public buses to get here, a journey of almost 90 minutes. I knew because I had offered to pay for a rideshare and he had politely but firmly refused, stating he could manage his own transport. Adam leaned over and whispered something sharp to Juliet. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw Juliet's quick, annoyed flash of an expression. Adam shook his head slightly, a gesture of dismissive judgment. Ethan didn't notice any of this. He was focused entirely on the casket. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched stiffly at his sides. His eyes were red, and his face was blotchy in that telltale way that happens when you've been trying desperately to hold back powerful grief. The crucial thing about Ethan is this. 8 years ago, his parents, my eldest son, Marcus, and his wonderful wife, Serena, were killed instantly in a horrific collision during a freak ice storm. Ethan was 11 with no siblings. Serena's parents had passed years prior, and the relatives were distant. Elias and I didn't hesitate for a second. We brought Ethan home that same week. He lived with us from age 11 to 18 in the comfortable second bedroom of our suburban home. He ate breakfast at our kitchen table every single morning. Elias had a steadfast philosophy about raising children. Earn your keep, build from the ground up, and value the work. He had started his life as an apprentice carpenter, worked his way up to owning a prominent commercial building firm, and retired at 63 with substantial wealth enough to be genuinely comfortable, but never ostentatious. When Ethan turned 18, he informed Elias he wanted to move out and make it entirely on his own. Elias didn't argue. Ethan moved out 3 months later. He rented a tiny rundown studio apartment in a rough part of the city. He immediately started working punishing 60-hour weeks at the warehouse. He's now taking night classes at the community college, studying structural engineering, just like his grandfather had done decades before. He relies solely on the bus system. He doesn't own a car. Adam, the successful one, thinks this is absurd. He said so quite loudly at Thanksgiving, standing in my kitchen with a glass of imported scotch. Ethan, you know Grandpa would financially support you, right? You don't have to subject yourself to living like this. It's self-punishment. Ethan had looked at him with that same calm, quiet expression. Grandpa built everything he had himself, Uncle Adam. I want to do exactly the same. Adam had laughed, a short barking sound. You're going to work yourself to dust just to prove a point no one, absolutely no one, cares about. Ethan hadn't responded. He just quietly went back to loading the dishwasher. Now, at the funeral, Ethan walked slowly up to the casket. He didn't break down and cry. He just stood there, his hand resting gently on the dark wood of Elias's chest, his head bowed low. 5 minutes, maybe 6. People started shifting uncomfortably in their seats, disturbed by the unbroken silence, but Ethan didn't move an inch. Finally, he stepped back. He didn't look at anyone, simply walked straight to the back row, and quietly sat down. After the service concluded, people shuffled awkwardly into the lobby. There was weak, lukewarm coffee in thin paper cups and inexpensive shortbread cookies arranged on plastic trays. Adam and Juliet stood near the beverage station, talking in low, quick voices. I positioned myself near the window, pretending to watch the street, but listening intently. Do you genuinely believe the old Redwood Hill property is specified in the will? Adam asked, his eyes scanning the crowd nervously. Juliet glanced around, confirming no one was within earshot. The one on Cedar Lane? Near the waterfront? Absolutely. That area has completely gentrified. It's worth at least $1,200,000 now. Are you serious, Jewel? Adam's voice rose slightly in disbelief. If we get that, we could easily split it, sell it off fast. That's precisely what I'm banking on. They were discussing the beloved house where they had grown up. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a gigantic sequoia tree in the backyard that Marcus, my eldest, had proudly climbed when he was 8, and Adam had fallen out of when he was 10, breaking his collarbone. Elias and I had lived there for 35 years. We only moved out 27 years ago when Juliet left for university. It was too much space for just the two of us. Elias had kept the house, renting it out steadily over the decades, generating substantial passive income. But it was still the cherished place where my children learned to walk, learned to ride their first bikes, and learned how to slam doors dramatically during teenage arguments. Adam and Juliet hadn't been inside that house in over 15 years, perhaps longer. But now, in the shadow of their father's death, they were ruthlessly calculating its market value down to the nearest $1,000. I turned sharply away before they could catch me listening to their cold appraisal. The post-funeral gathering was held at my home, the smaller, cozier ranch in the suburbs we had moved to after downsizing. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and critically the huge 3-car garage workshop where Elias spent the vast majority of his time. Adam and Juliet stayed for a precisely counted 25 minutes. Juliet's youngest daughter wanted to be home before dark, and Adam claimed he had a critical scheduled conference call at 6 o'clock sharp. They hugged me again, promised with obvious falsehood to check in very soon, and then they were gone. Ethan stayed. He didn't wait for me to ask if I needed help. He simply started cleaning. He gathered the heavy casserole dishes people had brought and washed them meticulously in the sink. He folded the 50-odd folding chairs, stacking them neatly, and disposed of the hundreds of used paper plates. It was the same routine he'd performed every Sunday when Elias was alive. Show up. Help out. Don't make a big deal about it. I was putting a massive platter of untouched leftovers in the refrigerator when the attorney arrived. Mr. Harrington, 60-something, with kind gray hair and thin wire-rimmed spectacles. He had been Elias's business and personal lawyer for over 30 years. He had handled the sale of the building firm when Elias retired, drafted the will, and made certain every legal detail was ironclad. He stood respectfully in the kitchen doorway, holding a thick cream-colored envelope. "Clara, I am terribly sorry to intrude like this," he said softly. But Elias was explicit. "He asked me to deliver this to you tonight." He insisted. "Read it alone." I took the envelope. It was surprisingly heavy, sealed tight, with my name written in Elias's precise, slightly flourishing handwriting on the front. "Thank you, Philip," I said, using his first name for the first time in years. He nodded, a gesture of shared immense grief, and left. Ethan finished the last of the dishes and walked into the living room, drying his hands on a clean dish towel. "I should head out now. I have a 6 a.m. shift at the warehouse tomorrow. Do you need me to call you a ride, Grandma?" "The bus is fine, Ethan," I said, knowing he'd prefer to save the money. He looked at me. He really looked, and there was something in his open, honest face that reminded me so forcefully of Marcus, my lost son, that a fresh wave of grief washed over me. "Thank you for staying," I whispered. "Of course, Grandma." He set the towel down neatly on the counter. "I'll come by this weekend. Help you with anything you need moved or sorted." After he left, I sat alone at the massive kitchen table with the letter resting directly in front of me. The house felt vast and unnervingly quiet. I could distinctly hear the refrigerator humming, the grandfather clock ticking its inevitable rhythm, and a solitary car passing far outside. I opened the envelope. Inside was Elias's script, careful, deliberate, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards, tedious appliance instructions, and notes left on the counter for over half a century. "Clara, my dearest, I apologize for doing this to you. I know it isn't fair to ask you to be a witness to what I've set in motion, but I need to know definitively if I've misjudged them. I need to see who they truly are when they think I'm not looking. I have arranged a private auction. My estate will be distributed that way. Philip has every last detail. When it happens, I need you to simply watch. Watch what they value. Watch what they are willing to fight for. That, my love, is who they have become. I am not angry with them. I am only profoundly sad. And I need you to see it too. I need you to understand why I felt I had to do this. I love you. Forever, Elias." I read it 4 times. Then I carefully folded the letter and slid it back inside the envelope. The workshop was noticeably cold. I hadn't been out there since Elias's passing. It still held that distinct, comforting scent of cedar sawdust, burnt welding wire, and light machine oil. Elias's signature smell. His enormous collection of tools hung neatly on the customized pegboard, organized with the exacting precision that defined him. His worn leather chair was pushed slightly back from the heavy workbench, looking exactly as if he had just stood up for a moment and would return any second. I walked over and sat down in that chair. I looked at the empty, familiar space where he used to sit every Saturday morning with his thermos of coffee, meticulously working on his latest model or writing in his journal. An auction. A profound emotional test. Elias had devised something elaborate, something designed to peel back the layers and show me who my children had truly become, and I was genuinely terrified of what the reveal would cost me. 3 days later, Mr. Harrington called. He asked us to come to his office, all 4 of us. He was brief, saying only that it was critically important and we needed to be there by 10 o'clock in the morning. I drove downtown, found inconvenient parking 3 blocks away, and walked briskly through the cool morning air. The building was one of the city's older, distinguished high-rises, featuring polished granite floors and elaborate brass elevator doors. Mr. Harrington's office occupied the 12th floor, with breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire cityscape. I could see the vast, churning Columbia River from where I sat. The water was gray, the sky cloudy, suggesting rain was imminent. Adam arrived first. He strode in, shook Mr. Harrington's hand with excessive confidence, and settled into a luxurious leather armchair like he held the deed to the entire floor. Juliet came next, carrying a structured leather handbag with heavy, glittering gold hardware. She kissed my cheek and sat down, crossing her long legs, immediately checking her expensive phone for messages. Ethan was precisely 7 minutes late. He rushed in, breathing hard, apologizing profusely, his hair damp from the initial drizzle that had just begun. He mumbled a hurried apology and quickly took the hard, wooden chair farthest from everyone else. Had to miss my morning shift for this, he muttered quietly, looking down. Adam glanced at him, a fleeting look of superior judgment, but didn't say a word. Mr. Harrington sat behind his massive oak desk, a disconcertingly large stack of papers neatly arranged in front of him. He looked unusually tired, somehow older than I remembered. "Thank you all for taking the time to come," he began formally. "I am acutely aware that this is a difficult meeting. I will endeavor to be as clear and concise as possible." He opened the designated folder and pulled out the first document. Mr. Elias Thorne's estate has been fully appraised. The total calculated liquid and property value is approximately $2,500,000. Juliet immediately sat up straighter. Adam leaned forward, his hands gripping his knees. "The estate," Mr. Harrington continued, his voice absolutely flat, "will be distributed through a mandatory private auction." Silence. A cold, heavy silence filled the spacious office. "An auction?" Adam finally broke the stillness. "Yes," Mr. Harrington confirmed. "Each named heir will receive $125,000 in allocated bidding credits. You will utilize these credits to bid on lots from the estate. Whatever you successfully win, you keep. These credits can only be used within the confines of this auction. They possess absolutely zero cash value outside of it." "This is utterly insane," Juliet hissed, her carefully composed demeanor cracking. "Why in the world would Dad do something like this?" Mr. Harrington offered no answer. He simply kept reading, his eyes fixed on the page. "The auction will take place this upcoming Saturday morning at 10 o'clock precisely. The location will be determined and communicated tomorrow. All heirs must be present. Should you choose not to attend, you immediately forfeit your credits and any legal claim to the estate." "Is this legal?" Adam asked, his face tight with calculation. "Yes, completely," the attorney assured him. "Elias was determined to be of sound mind when he drafted this final will. It was witnessed, notarized, and formally filed with the probate court. It is, for all intents and purposes, ironclad." Adam sat back, already thinking, already calculating percentages. Mr. Harrington pulled out another sheet of paper. "There are precisely 5 lots. Let me walk you through each of them." He read slowly, deliberately, ensuring every single word was heard. Lot 1. The house on Cedar Lane in Redwood Hill. 5 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, approximately 2,700 square feet. Currently rented. Appraised liquid value, $1,200,000. Minimum bid, $100,000. Adam nodded sharply. I saw him exchange a subtle, knowing glance with Juliet. Lot 2. The specialized heavy equipment and small vintage truck collection. For working vehicles, including a 1965 Ford pickup and 2 restored tractors. Appraised value, $450,000. Minimum bid, $100,000. Juliet uncrossed her legs, leaning forward, her interest piqued. Lot 3. The contents of the entire garage workshop. Extensive power tools, high-end woodworking setup, industrial drill press, hand tools, and custom workbenches. Appraised value $20,000. Minimum bid, $5,000. Ethan's head finally came up. He was listening intently. Lot 4. The liquid financial portfolio. Diversified, blue chip holdings. Current market value, $175,000. These are easily liquid assets. You could sell these shares as early as Monday morning if you so desired. Minimum bid, $90,000. Adam looked sharply at Ethan, a quick, assessing glance. And lot 5, Mr. Harrington paused, his voice softening just slightly. Elias's deeply personal effects collection. He read the contents slowly. One leather-bound, hand-stitched architectural journal, spanning over 40 years of daily entries. 12 extensive family photo albums. A faded bronze star medal from his service in Korea. A classic gold pocket watch that belonged to Elias's father. Letters exchanged between Elias and Clara during the war. Elias's original wedding ring. Various small, significant memorabilia. Ethan was staring at Mr. Harrington now, not blinking. Appraised value, the attorney stated clearly, is $0. Sentimental value only. Minimum bid, $90,000. Wait, Adam cut in, bewildered. $90,000 for photos and an old journal? That is completely unreasonable. Those are the specific terms of the will, Adam, Mr. Harrington stated firmly. That's utterly ridiculous, Juliet declared. Nobody will pay $90,000 for that junk. Mr. Harrington looked directly at her. Then it will not be bid on. So what happens to it? I asked, a sudden cold knot tightening in my stomach. Mr. Harrington's voice went flat, utterly devoid of emotion. If Lot 5 receives no bids, the contents will be legally destroyed. Destroyed. Not donated, Mrs. Thorne. Not archived. Destroyed. Those were Elias's specific, explicit instructions. That is truly insane, Juliet said, shaking her head. Why would he demand that? He stated that if no one in his family valued them enough to bid on them, then total strangers certainly shouldn't possess them either. The room fell quiet again. Ethan was looking down at his large, working hands. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat one final time. There is one more crucial rule. In the event of identical bids on any lot, priority will legally go to the eldest living heir by birth order. Adam smiled a fleeting, small, deeply satisfied smirk. That, he announced, is me. Any questions? Mr. Harrington finally asked, looking around the room. Yes, Adam said, sitting up straight. Can we use our personal funds to bid? Can we supplement the credits? No, the attorney stated. Credits only. $125,000 per heir. And absolutely nothing more. If you do not utilize all your credits, any unused portion is legally forfeited to a designated charity. Adam sat back, crossing his arms, absorbing the information. Okay. Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning. Where is the exact location? I will email you the precise address tomorrow morning. We stood to leave. Juliet grabbed her handbag with a sharp click. Adam checked his phone immediately. Ethan remained seated, staring intently at the printed paper Mr. Harrington had given him, the paper detailing the lot descriptions. In the parking garage, I deliberately hung back. Adam and Juliet stood by Adam's black luxury sedan, talking in hushed, urgent voices. I was close enough to hear every word if I remained perfectly still. I'm securing the house, Adam stated flatly. It is the most valuable liquid asset on that entire list. Fine, Juliet conceded, clearly annoyed. Then I want the heavy equipment and the trucks. They're faster to liquidate. What about the stocks? Adam asked, referring to Lot 4. Ethan is the only one who could possibly bid on those now, since we'll both be out of credits after the first 2 lots. Juliet shrugged, her designer coat pulled tightly around her. Let him take them. $175,000 will finally get him out of that dreadful apartment. He'd be utterly stupid not to grab them. Ethan is naive, but he's not stupid. They climbed into Adam's car and sped off immediately, their voices already fading into the discussion of lawyers and closing costs. I walked slowly to my older sedan. The predicted rain was beginning to fall harder now, cold and steady. I got in and just sat there, the wipers making a rhythmic scraping sound against the glass, waiting. Ethan appeared a few minutes later. He didn't have an umbrella, just walking through the heavy rain like he hadn't even noticed it was falling. I rolled down the passenger window. Ethan, you need a ride? He looked up, genuinely startled. Yeah, thanks, Grandma. He quickly got into the passenger seat, dripping wet, smelling faintly of cold rain and the functional soap he used at the warehouse. We sat there for a minute, the engine running, the heater blasting warm air. Your grandfather wrote in that journal every single Saturday for over 40 years, I said quietly. Ethan didn't look at me. He was staring straight out the windshield, watching the heavy rain stream down. I know, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I used to watch him every Saturday morning in the workshop. He'd sit there with his coffee and write. I asked him once what he was writing about. He said that someday I'd understand. When I was finally ready. Did you ever ask him again? No. We drove in complete silence for a long time. I dropped him off at the nearest bus stop to his apartment building. He got out, thanked me, and started to walk away through the downpour. Ethan, I called out. He turned back instantly. Saturday, I said, looking him straight in the eye. Will you be there? Yes, Grandma, he replied, his gaze unwavering. I'll be there. He walked off resolutely into the persistent rain. I watched him until his figure completely disappeared around the nearest street corner. 4 days until Saturday. 4 days until Elias's final devastating test. Saturday arrived much faster than I expected. The auction was held in a nondescript rented space downtown. A kind of bare event hall with cold concrete floors and exposed ventilation pipes tracing the ceiling. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows facing a small podium up front, complete with a microphone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating a harsh, unforgiving glare. Elias's belongings were displayed along tables running the perimeter of the room, each with a numbered sign. The Cedar Lane house was represented by a large, framed photograph of the property and a substantial stack of legal documents. The heavy equipment and vehicles were shown in another large photo, all 4 pieces lined up neatly in what used to be Elias's maintenance yard. The workshop tools were represented by several high-resolution photographs, still arranged precisely inside his garage, accompanied by a laminated, detailed inventory list. I stood there staring at it all. 52 years of a dedicated life, reduced now to 5 numbered lots with designated price tags. Mr. Harrington was calmly setting up his paperwork at a table near the podium. The auctioneer was a man in his late 50s, dressed in a sharp suit but bearing an utterly bored, professional expression. He had undoubtedly presided over hundreds of these somber, financial family events. Adam and Juliet arrived together. They had clearly coordinated their efforts, both dressed meticulously as if heading to a high-stakes business meeting. Adam offered me a brief nod. Juliet gave my cheek a quick, dry brush of a kiss. Neither of them spared a glance for the tools or the photos of the journal. They were entirely focused on the bidding paddles and the paperwork Mr. Harrington was handing out. Ethan came in last. He was still in his warehouse clothes, the same ones from the day of the will reading, suggesting he had come directly from an early shift. He stood quietly in the back, his hands deep in his pockets, gazing intensely at the photos of his grandfather's workshop tools. We took our assigned seats. The auctioneer stepped up to the microphone and tapped it twice. The sharp sound echoed unnervingly off the concrete walls. Good morning. We have 5 lots to proceed through. Let us begin. He picked up a clipboard. Lot 1. The residential property on Cedar Lane in Redwood Hill. 5 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, approximately 2,700 square feet. Appraised value $1,200,000. Minimum bid, $100,000. Adam's paddle shot up instantly. $125,000. The auctioneer barely paused. I have $125,000 from Adam Thorne. Juliet's paddle went up just as fast. $125,000. I have $125,000 from Juliet Thorne. 2 identical maximum bids. The auctioneer looked between the 2 of them. Per the will, the eldest heir takes priority. That would be Adam Thorne. He pointed his gavel at my son. Lot 1 is sold to Adam Thorne for 125,000 credits. Adam settled back in his chair, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. Juliet's expression went immediately tight with controlled fury. She had known the elder priority rule, but she was still visibly angry at the loss. Lot 2, the auctioneer continued. The heavy equipment and vintage vehicle collection. 4 units, including the 1965 Ford pickup, all in restored working condition. Appraised value $450,000. Minimum bid $100,000. Juliet didn't wait a moment. $125,000. The auctioneer scanned the room, waiting. Any other bids? Nothing. Adam was now out of credits. Ethan didn't move a muscle. Sold to Juliet Thorne for 125,000 credits. Juliet crossed her arms. She had secured the substantial asset she had come for. I watched them both. My children had each spent their maximum credits on highly liquid items they could immediately convert to cash. The house Adam would quickly list and flip within 6 months. The vehicles Juliet would dispatch to a broker before the week was out. Neither of them had looked at those things and thought of Elias. They had looked at them and seen nothing but dollar signs and immense profit. Lot 3, the auctioneer announced. The full contents of the workshop. Complete woodworking setup, table saw, drill press, hand tools, workbenches. Appraised value $20,000. Minimum bid $5,000. Ethan raised his paddle without hesitation. $5,000. The auctioneer waited patiently. Any other bids? Silence. Sold to Ethan Thorne for 5,000 credits. Adam leaned over and muttered something cutting to Juliet. She smirked in response. Ethan didn't react. He simply lowered his paddle and stared at his hands. The entire atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Adam and Juliet were entirely out of credits. Ethan was the only participant left who could bid. The auctioneer knew it, Mr. Harrington knew it, and Adam and Juliet definitely knew it. Lot 4, the auctioneer continued, his voice adopting a slightly slower, more deliberate cadence now, as if he too sensed the rising tension. He wanted to ensure every person heard this critical lot description. The liquid financial portfolio. Diversified. Blue chip holdings across multiple stable sectors. Current market value $175,000. These are easily liquid assets. The shares can be converted to cash as early as Monday morning. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Minimum bid $90,000. Every head in the room, including the auctioneers, swiveled sharply toward Ethan. He was staring fixedly at the podium, completely motionless. Adam suddenly stood up. He wasn't subtle anymore, he was pleading. Ethan, listen to me closely. You spend $90,000 in credits, you immediately secure stocks worth $175,000. You liquidate them on Monday. That's real disposable cash. That is what truly matters right now. Juliet leaned forward, her eyes wide. Ethan, this is liquid. This is genuine money. You can use this to completely change your life. Get out of that hellhole apartment. Ethan looked at me. I offered no advice. I felt incapable of speech, unsure of what counsel to give. Your grandfather built that portfolio over 30 years. I finally managed to say, my voice quiet, directed only to him. Ethan kept staring down at the paper Mr. Harrington had given him. The lot descriptions. I could see his eyes moving, reading something repeatedly. What's lot 5? He asked abruptly. The auctioneer looked confused. I beg your pardon? Lot 5. What is the minimum bid? Ethan repeated, louder this time. Mr. Harrington answered, his voice firm from his table. $90,000. The room went completely dead silent. Adam's face transformed. His earlier calculating confidence replaced by something ugly and visceral. Ethan, no. Don't even remotely think about it. The journal. Juliet hissed. The journal costs the exact same amount as the stocks? The stocks are worth $175,000. Adam's voice was escalating rapidly. The journal is worth precisely $0 in cash. Ethan looked directly at the auctioneer. Pass. For a second, no one moved, no one breathed. Pass, the auctioneer finally said. I am not bidding on lot 4. Ethan. Juliet scrambled to her feet. What in God's name are you doing? You just freely gave up $175,000. Adam was pacing in a tight circle now, his hands running through his immaculate hair. Are you completely out of your mind? The auctioneer cleared his throat. No bids received for lot 4. Per the instructions in the will, this lot will be liquidated and all proceeds formally donated to charity. Ethan, That is more money than you will see combined in the next 10 years. Juliet protested, her voice cracking. Ethan didn't reply. He was looking down at his lap, his jaw tightly set. I desperately wanted to speak, to somehow signal to him that it was acceptable, that I somehow understood, but I didn't understand. Not yet. Adam dropped heavily back into his chair. He looked at Juliet, his expression bewildered. He's going to bid on the journal. He can't be that stupid, can he? He just passed on $175,000, Juliet replied, her voice filled with disbelief. The auctioneer, maintaining his bored, professional composure. He had clearly seen families disintegrate over far less money, picked up his clipboard again. Lot 5, he announced. The room became absolutely quiet again. The auctioneer walked to a small side table behind the podium. He picked up an antique, dark wooden box, small and noticeably worn, obviously. A piece crafted by Elias himself. He carried it back and set it down carefully in front of the microphone. Lot 5, he repeated with somber weight. Elias Thorne's personal effects collection. He opened the box, starting to pull the items out one by one, holding each up for the small audience to see. One leather-bound architectural journal, containing over 40 years of handwritten entries. He set it reverently on the podium. 12 comprehensive family photo albums. He held one up, its pages visible through the brittle plastic cover. A bronze star medal from his service in Korea. The aged metal glinted faintly in the harsh light. A classic gold pocket watch belonging to Elias's late father. He clicked it open, showing the room the delicate mechanism. Letters exchanged between Elias and Clara Thorne during the war. He fanned them out, the envelopes yellowed with the passage of decades. Elias's original wedding ring. He held up the plain, simple gold band. And various other personal memorabilia. He placed everything back inside the box. Appraised value, $0, he finished, his eyes landing directly on Ethan. Sentimental value only. Minimum bid. $90,000. Adam exploded. He leaped to his feet, his voice booming and echoing off the cold concrete walls. Ethan, this is the single most idiotic decision of your entire life. Stop this now. Juliet stood as well, equally furious. Those are just pictures and old paper. You just willingly passed on $175,000 of real usable cash. Ethan didn't flinch. He was staring intently at the antique wooden box. The stocks are just money, he said, his voice quiet but steady. Exactly. Adam's face was scarlet. Money you desperately need. You're struggling paycheck to paycheck in a terrible apartment. Money I can work for, Ethan countered, his gaze unwavering. Juliet's voice went thin with hysteria. You absolutely cannot work for $175,000 quickly. That will take you years. Ethan looked at her, his face unnervingly calm. But I can't work for Grandpa's memories. I watched his hands. They were shaking almost imperceptibly, but his jaw was firmly set and his eyes were locked on that box. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Do I have a bid? Adam rushed closer, no longer yelling but pleading with raw desperation. Ethan, stop. Please think about your future. Think about everything you are willingly giving up. You could secure your own place, buy a reliable car, stop working those brutal night shifts. You could dash. Ethan raised his paddle. $90,000. Adam froze mid-plea. For a long drawn-out second, he simply stood there, utterly paralyzed. Then he dropped heavily back into his chair, as if his legs had suddenly been cut out from under him. Juliet whirled toward me, her voice ragged. Mom! Say something. He's utterly ruining his life. I looked at Ethan. He was still staring at the box, not at Adam, not at Juliet, and not at me. It's his choice, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly firm. His stupid, idiotic choice, Adam muttered, his head in his hands. The auctioneer scanned the quiet room. Silence. Adam and Juliet had 0 credits remaining. They were completely unable to bid, even if they had suffered a last-minute change of heart. Adam leaned forward one last time. Ethan, listened to reason. You can legally withdraw the bid right now. Let it go to charity. You'll still retain your credits. Mr. Harrington spoke up from his table. The credits are explicitly non-refundable once a formal bid is placed, Adam. Then bid on nothing. Adam roared. Walk away with absolutely nothing. That is still infinitely better than this. The auctioneer spoke clearly, cutting over him. Going once. Juliet's voice was a choked sob. Ethan, please. You're choosing worthless paper over the chance at a comfortable life. Ethan looked at the box, then briefly at me, then back at the box. No, he said, his voice now a steady declaration. I'm choosing Grandpa. The gavel slammed down with a resounding, decisive crack that echoed through the entire hall. Sold to Ethan Thorne for 90,000 credits. Ethan immediately stood and walked slowly to the front. The auctioneer carefully handed him the wooden box. Ethan accepted it gently, holding it as if it were fragile. It looked unexpectedly light in his large, working hands. He tucked it carefully under one arm. Adam was still sitting, staring blindly at the concrete floor. Juliet had buried her face in her hands. Ethan walked directly past them toward the exit. $90,000, Adam said without looking up, his voice hollow. For a wooden box that likely weighs less than 5 pounds. Ethan stopped at the door. I know, he said simply. Then you are a monumental idiot. Ethan turned around, looking Adam square in the eye. Really? He asked softly. Maybe I am. But at least I'll know who my grandfather was. Can you honestly say the same, Uncle Adam? Adam's head snapped up, meeting his gaze. I lived with him for 18 years, Adam spat out. And I lived with him for 7. Ethan's voice remained steady, quietly devastating. But I listened. The undeniable truth of that statement hung heavy in the air between them. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor. The auction is over, I announced. Adam, Juliet, you should leave now. Juliet looked at me, her eyes wet and accusing. Mom, we absolutely need to discuss this. He just dash. There is nothing more to discuss. I kept my voice level and firm. You secured what you wanted. The house, the equipment. Now go. You cannot possibly think what Ethan did was smart. Adam insisted. I think he made the only choice that truly mattered to him, I countered. That's absolutely insane. Maybe, I conceded. But it is undeniably done. Juliet grabbed her belongings. Adam was still sitting, shaking his head slightly in disbelief. Finally he stood. They walked out together, their voices low and sharp, muttering about contacting different lawyers and the unfairness of the outcome. The door clicked shut behind them. Mr. Harrington was calmly packing up his papers. The auctioneer was already on his cell phone. The room felt enormous now and achingly empty. Ethan stood near the chairs, holding the box protectively against his chest. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, he murmured. I know. Are they right? I walked over to him and placed my hand firmly on his arm. Come to the house tonight, Ethan. We will open it together in Grandpa's workshop. That's where he wrote it. That's precisely where it should be read. Ethan nodded slowly. He looked utterly exhausted, as if he had been holding an unbearable weight for too long and had only just finally set it down. Okay, Grandma. You did what you truly believed was right. Did I? I didn't answer. I didn't know the full truth yet. He left first, walking back out into the dreary gray afternoon, the precious wooden box tucked securely under his arm. I watched him through the window. He didn't have a car. He would have to take the bus home carrying that box, carrying $90,000 worth of memories. Mr. Harrington approached me. Clara, that was something. Exactly what Elias would have done. He trailed off, shaking his head slowly. I knew exactly what Elias would have thought. He had planned this final reveal. He had known, or at least intensely hoped, that someone might bid on that journal. He'd known it might cost them everything else. He wanted to see who would make that profound choice. And now I knew too. I drove home alone. The house was unnervingly quiet when I arrived. I walked through the familiar rooms, the living room, the kitchen, everything in its proper place. Everything visually the same as it had been this morning. Except it wasn't. Ethan had just sacrificed a life-changing fortune for a small box of paper and metal. Adam and Juliet had stalked away furious and bitter. My family had been decisively fractured over an auction Elias had carefully designed to force me to see the naked truth. and I still didn't entirely understand what the final truth was meant to be. But tonight, in the workshop, when Ethan opened that leather-bound journal, I thought perhaps I finally would. Ethan arrived after dark. I heard his cautious footsteps on the driveway, followed by the quiet, recognizable knock on the back door. He was still carrying the precious wooden box. "Come in, dear," I said softly. He followed me through the kitchen, out the back door, and across the small concrete patio to the garage. I flipped the main lights on. The fluorescent bulbs flickered violently for a moment, then settled into a steady, bright hum. The workshop immediately filled with the enduring familiar scent of sawdust and light machine oil. Elias's scent. Ethan stood rooted in the doorway for a long moment, just looking. The enormous workbench where Elias had spent thousands of dedicated hours. The pegboard, now with several empty spaces where his tools used to hang. The chair pushed back just as he left it. "Set it right there," I instructed, pointing to the center of the workbench. Ethan placed the box down carefully, almost reverently. He opened the lid and began taking things out, one by one. The photo albums came out first, 12 of them, different colors and sizes, spanning different eras. He opened one of the oldest. Baby pictures. Ethan as an infant, red-faced and impossibly tiny. Marcus, my lost eldest son, holding him, grinning broadly at the camera. "I've never seen these," Ethan said quietly, tracing the edge of one photograph. "Your father was so incredibly proud," I whispered, moving closer to look over his shoulder. "He called us from the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, woke us up and didn't care. He just kept repeating, 'I have a son. I have a son.'" Ethan set the album down and picked up the Bronze Star medal. The purple ribbon was faded and brittle. The gold edges of the medal were tarnished from age. "Korea," I said. He never spoke much about it. Got hit by shrapnel in his leg. Spent 4 months recovering in a field hospital near the border. The pocket watch was next. Heavy brass with a distinct, elaborate engraving on the back. Ethan turned it over and read the inscription aloud. "To William Thorne for 30 years of dedicated service, 1952. Elias's father," I explained, "worked for the regional freight company his whole life. Died when Elias was 23. Left him only that watch and not much else." Ethan clicked it open. The inside was etched with intricate, tiny numbers and gears. It was still silently ticking. He set it down, then picked up the journal. The leather was dark and worn smooth from decades of constant handling. The spine was cracked in several places. The thick pages were deeply yellowed at the edges. Ethan opened it to the very first page. Elias's handwriting. Neat, careful, and slanting slightly to the right. Ethan read aloud. "March 3rd. Marcus turned 8 today. Taught him how to safely use the small block plane. He was timid at first. Kept his hands too far from the blade. But he listened intently, asked sharp questions, and followed every single instruction I gave him. That's truly all you can ever ask. That they listen and learn." I remembered that day perfectly. Marcus had come inside covered head to toe in cedar shavings, his eyes bright, talking a mile a minute about the small lopsided birdhouse he'd managed to create. Ethan flipped through pages. Entries about Marcus's high school graduation. About Adam starting a small company selling repurposed construction materials out of our old barn. It failed spectacularly within 18 months. "I didn't know about that," Ethan murmured. "Uncle Adam doesn't like to discuss his failures." There was a detailed entry about Juliet's difficult, bitter divorce, about how she'd shown up at the house one afternoon with 2 suitcases and a dark bruise on her arm and hadn't uttered a single word for 4 days. Ethan kept flipping forward, finding entries about himself. "Here," he said. "This one is dated the day I was born." He read it silently first. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Then he read it aloud, his voice shaking just slightly with emotion. "Marcus called this morning. 2:15. He has a son. Ethan. Ethan Marcus Thorne. 7 pounds 9 ounces. Healthy, thank God." Marcus sounded exhausted but truly blissful. Said Ethan has his grandfather's nose. I told him that's a good name. Solid. I pray I am around long enough to teach him what I taught Marcus. Ethan stopped reading, set the journal down, and stared at it. "He wanted to teach you," I said softly. "And he did for 7 very important years." Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, picked up the journal again and kept reading. He found the entry from the horrific night Marcus and Serena died. I knew which one it was from the immediate, painful change in his face. "Do you want me to read this one?" I asked. "No, I need to," he insisted. He read it silently. His jaw tightened further. When he finished, he closed the journal slowly, set it on the workbench and remained silent. "What did it say?" I asked finally. "That Marcus was only 42, that it was far too young, that you and Grandpa were taking me in, and that he didn't know how to be a father again at 71, but he would try." Ethan's voice was flat, hollowed out. "He said he wished more than anything that it had been him instead of Marcus." I didn't say anything. There was simply nothing adequate to say. Ethan opened the journal one last time, flipping further forward, finding another entry. "This one's about the camping trip," he said. "When I was 13. He read it aloud. "Took Ethan to the mountain cabin this week. Just the two of us. Hiked every morning. Caught nothing but a cold. But it didn't matter. He asked about Marcus. I told him every story I could remember. Every youthful mistake, every good, solid thing. He listened like every single word was life or death important. That is Marcus's son. No question about it." Ethan looked at me, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips. "I still remember that trip. The absolute best week of my life." We sat together for another long while, reading through more entries. Elias's musings on retirement, on the challenges of aging, on watching Adam and Juliet morph into people he genuinely didn't quite recognize anymore. Then Ethan found the last entry. It was dated exactly 2 weeks before Elias died. He read it out loud, his voice suddenly clearer, stronger. "If you are reading this entry now, you have chosen memory and loyalty over money. You spent $90,000 on paper, photos, and old metal. The others think you are undeniably insane. Maybe you are, my boy, but I think you have just proven you are the person I always hoped someone in this family would become. Tomorrow morning, go immediately to see Philip Harrington. He holds a sealed envelope for whoever reads this last entry. Ask him for it and know, absolutely know, that you earned what is inside. Not because of blood relation, but because you listened, because you valued what truly matters in life. That is all I ever wanted to see. I'm so proud of you. Grandpa Elias." Ethan set the journal down, his hands finally steady. "What envelope?" I shook my head. "I have no idea. Should I call Philip now? It's almost 9 o'clock at night." "No," Ethan said. "We'll call him tomorrow morning." We sat in the silent workshop for another hour. I shared stories about the things Elias had written about. Ethan asked questions. We looked at the photos, old, faded ones of Marcus as a child, newer ones of Adam and Juliet before they became so consumed by materialism, pictures of Elias and me when we were impossibly young, long before any of this tragedy. Finally, Ethan carefully packed everything back into the wooden box. "Thank you, Grandma," he said, "for letting me open it here. This is exactly where it belonged." He left around 10 o'clock. I watched him walk down the driveway, the box tucked under his arm again. Then I went inside and went directly to bed. The next morning, Sunday, Ethan called promptly at 8 o'clock. "Grandma," he said, his voice taut with suppressed excitement. "Philip Harrington said he can meet me at his office in exactly 1 hour. Can you come with me?" "Yes, absolutely," I replied immediately. I drove downtown and met Ethan outside the high-rise building. We rode the elevator up to the 12th floor together. Mr. Harrington was waiting, his office door already open. "Come in, please," he invited us. We sat down. Mr. Harrington reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a large, heavy envelope sealed tight. On the front, in Elias's recognizable handwriting, were the words, "For whoever wins Lot 5. He handed the envelope to Ethan. Ethan opened it carefully, pulling out a thick stack of papers, legal documents, an official surveyor's report, and a registered property deed. What is this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a breath. Mr. Harrington folded his hands on the desk. "That, Ethan, is the title to the Cascade Foothills property in Clackamas County, Oregon. 40 acres of secluded, untouched timberland." Ethan stared at the papers, utterly confused. Lot 5 included not just the personal effects, Mr. Harrington explained. It also included full, clear title to that specific property. Elias deliberately omitted any mention of it during the auction process. He wanted to see who would bid on the journal without knowing what else came as part of the package. Ethan stared blankly at the deed. He set the papers down on the polished desk, looking first at me, then back at Mr. Harrington. "How much is this land worth, Philip?" he asked, his voice a strained whisper. "The most recent appraisal, completed 3 months ago, came in at $3,300,000, Mr. Harrington stated calmly. Ethan went visibly pale. He sat back slowly. "I own land worth $3,300,000? "Yes, Ethan," the attorney confirmed. "You do." There was one final folded piece of paper left in the envelope, a letter written on heavy stock. Ethan unfolded it and read it silently first, his eyes scanning the familiar script. Then he read it out loud, his voice steadying with every word. "Ethan or Adam or Juliet, whoever you are, I could not simply give you this property. If I had, the others would have immediately fought you, claimed favoritism, and dragged you through the courts for years. They would have believed I simply played favorites. So I made you earn it. Not the property itself, but the knowledge of it. You proved, beyond any doubt, that you value me, your grandfather, and our shared memory over immediate financial gain. You chose the letters and the journal when you could have very easily chosen the stocks. You gave up everything you had in credits for a box of paper you had never even read. Now absolutely no one can legally or morally claim you don't deserve what you have gotten. The entire auction was never truly about dividing my estate. It was, from the very beginning, about revealing genuine character. You, my boy, revealed yours. I am profoundly proud of you. Grandpa Elias." Ethan carefully folded the letter and set it down. "Do Adam and Juliet know about this yet?" he asked. "Not yet," Mr. Harrington said. "But the deed transfer is a public record. It will be officially filed with the county clerk by the close of business tomorrow, Monday. They will most certainly find out then. They are going to completely lose control," Ethan predicted quietly. "Yes," Mr. Harrington agreed. "Undeniably. That afternoon they did. I was in my kitchen, brewing a calming cup of Earl Grey tea, when I heard the unmistakable sound of tires screeching sharply into the driveway, followed by 2 car doors slamming violently, and then an aggressive pounding on my front door. I opened it. Adam and Juliet were standing there, both of their faces red with sheer, uncontrolled fury. "You hid a $3 million asset from the estate," Adam shouted, shoving past me into the house. Juliet followed him closely. "How long, Mom? How long have you known?" "Known what?" I asked, playing for time. "The property. The Oregon land. It was secretly included in Lot 5 and not one person, not the attorney, not you, said a single word." Ethan was sitting quietly on my couch. He'd been there since we returned from Mr. Harrington's office. He stood up slowly as they cornered me. "I found out this morning," he said calmly. "Liar." Adam got directly in his face, his body shaking with rage. "Nobody spends $90,000 on a journal without having inside knowledge there is a massive payoff." "I didn't know anything about the property," Ethan insisted. "Then you're even stupider than I initially thought," Adam yelled. "It was in the will," I cut in sharply, stepping between them. "It was listed as part of Lot 5. Your father simply chose not to disclose the immense value that came with it. But it was there, legally specified." Juliet rounded on me, her eyes accusing. "And you knew? This entire auction was a calculated scam. He rigged it so the poor, dutiful grandson would get the biggest payout." "It was a test," I corrected him, looking Adam directly in the eye. "Your father gave you exactly what you valued, Adam. You valued property you could flip for a huge profit. Juliet, you valued assets you could quickly sell for cash. Ethan valued his grandfather's memories and his legacy. The hidden property was a deliberate, specific reward for choosing pure love over money. So Ethan gets $3 million and we get absolutely nothing of real value?" Juliet cried out. "You got precisely what you wanted," I stated firmly. "The house, the equipment, things you can sell immediately. You both walked away with exactly what you chose. The only difference is that Ethan got far more than he expected. And that truth is what is truly eating you alive. We're contesting this immediately." Juliet threatened. On what possible grounds? I asked. The will is perfectly legal. The auction was fair and transparent. Ethan did not know about the land. You have absolutely no case. Adam pointed a shaking finger at Ethan. This is not over. Yes, it is, I said, my voice rising above his. Your father saw exactly what you had become, people who measure the depth of love in dollars and cents. He gave you one final clear chance to prove him wrong. You chose money. Ethan chose memory. That, my children, is the final undeniable difference. Adam and Juliet left the house. The door slammed shut with a violent shudder. Tires screeched as they backed out of the driveway. Ethan and I stood in the quiet house. That was exceptionally bad, Ethan said softly. Yes. They're never going to forgive me, he predicted. No, probably not, I agreed sadly. He sat back down on the couch, putting his head in his hands. I sat down next to him, not speaking, simply offering my presence. Outside, the sun was beginning its slow descent. The house was getting dark. 2 weeks passed. The house stayed quiet. Too quiet. I made dinner for one. I ate at the table alone. The phone never rang. Adam and Juliet didn't call. I heard updates only through Mr. Harrington. Adam had immediately listed the Redwood Hill house the very Monday following the confrontation. He put it on the market with a luxury broker. Mr. Harrington said he had already received a substantial cash offer. Pending the current tenant's lease expiration, Adam would realize a considerable profit, a very good one. I didn't know what he planned to do with the cash, and I didn't ask. Juliet sold 3 of the 4 vehicles and kept the 1965 Ford pickup. Mr. Harrington said she had secured top dollar for the restored tractors and the other antique vehicles. She was doing well. Ethan was still faithfully working at the warehouse. 60-hour weeks, still taking the bus, still living in that same tiny studio apartment. Developers had been relentlessly calling him, Mr. Harrington said. Offers were coming in: $3,500,000, $3,700,000, $4,100,000. Ethan hadn't answered a single one of them. I drove to the warehouse on a Tuesday. I found him easily on his short lunch break, sitting on the edge of a concrete loading dock, slowly eating a modest sandwich. Can we talk for a minute, dear? I asked. Yeah, Grandma. Get in the car. We sat in my sedan. The heat was running, and a fine drizzle of rain was starting to fall. I brought you something, I said. I reached into the back seat and handed him the heavy journal. You left it at my house. I know, he said, taking it carefully. I wanted to keep it there in the workshop. Why? Because that's where it belongs. That's where he wrote it. He opened the journal immediately, flipping to a page near the middle. He showed it to me. Look at this one, Grandma. It was the entry for our 50th wedding anniversary. I read Elias's script, careful and precise. The entry was short, unlike many others. 50 years with Clara today. Took her to dinner at the exact place we went on our first date. She ordered the same dish. Pan-seared scallops. I got the steak. We barely spoke much. Didn't need to. 50 years and I still don't understand how I got so lucky. She is the only thing in my entire life I ever truly got right on the very first try. I couldn't speak. I simply stared at the words, a deep, overwhelming warmth spreading through my chest. I thought you should see that, Ethan said quietly. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, giving the journal back to him. Thank you, Ethan. We sat there for a long time, simply watching the rain streak down the windshield. I'm keeping the property, Ethan announced suddenly. Not selling it. The developers are offering an enormous amount of money. I reminded him gently. I know, he agreed, folding his hands. But it's mine. Grandpa wanted me to possess it. I am not going to immediately flip it for quick cash. Adam and Juliet will continue to think you are completely insane. I warned him. Ethan smiled a little, a genuine tired smile. They already do. Have you heard from either of them? No. Me neither. Not yet. Ethan looked down, crumpling his sandwich wrapper. I'm sorry, Grandma. I know they are your children. You didn't do this, dear. They did. Your grandfather tried to show them something profound, and they simply refused to see it. That is not in any way your fault. He nodded, finished the last bite of his sandwich. I need to get back to work now. Okay. He got out of the car, then paused and turned back. I'll come by Sunday. I'll help with anything you need done. You don't have to do that anymore, Ethan. I know, he said. He walked back toward the warehouse, disappearing through the enormous metal doors. That Sunday, he showed up exactly when he said he would. We went out to the workshop. He was meticulously moving the tools bit by bit, managing to somehow fit them into his small studio apartment, making room for the memories. He was pulling some heavy, dusty storage boxes off a high shelf when something else fell to the floor. A small, handsome wooden box, clearly handmade, Elias's meticulous work. What's this? Ethan asked, picking it up. He opened it carefully. Inside were layers of old letters, the envelopes deeply yellowed and brittle. Ethan picked one up and read the return address. These are from my dad. To Grandpa Elias. He opened one, read it quickly, closed his eyes for a second, then placed it back in the box with extreme care. Letters from Marcus, written before Ethan was even born. He didn't need to read them aloud. I could see the profound meaning etched clearly on his face. Do you think Grandpa Elias really knew I'd choose the journal? Ethan asked finally, his voice thoughtful. I considered it. I thought about Elias's cryptic letter, about the meticulously planned auction, about the cost he knew it might carry. I think he hoped, I said. There is a huge difference, Ethan. Ethan packed the letters into the small box, setting it with the other things he was taking. I don't regret it, he said firmly. Choosing the journal. Even if there had been no hidden property, even if it genuinely was just photos and paper, I still would have done it. I know you would have, dear, I said. That's why you deserved it. He loaded the last of the tools into his small truck one he'd been borrowing from his boss, said he'd be back next weekend for more. He drove off down the street. I went back inside. I walked through the empty house. Felt too big now, overwhelmingly quiet. I thought about Adam, about the Redwood Hill house already pending sale. I thought about Juliet with her remaining car and her expensive clothes, and her daughter who barely knew her grandfather. I thought about Ethan, still working double shifts while sitting on millions of dollars he flatly refused to liquidate. Elias had wanted me to see who my children had become. And I had. I didn't like the painful truth, but I had definitely seen it. And I had also seen what Ethan was, what my lost son, Marcus, had raised him to be, and what Elias had intensely hoped someone would eventually become. I went out to the workshop one final time. I turned off the light. I left the door quietly unlocked. Ethan would be back. He always came back. I stood there in the dark garage, enveloped by the ghost of Elias's presence, the scent of 50 years of a dedicated life. The auction was definitively over, but the profound truth it had revealed would stay with me for whatever time I had left. So that is my complete story. I'd love to hear what you think. Was Elias right to test his family in such a brutal final way, or was he terribly unfair to Adam and Juliet? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please subscribe to the Wisdom's Legacy channel for more stories like mine.